give you the gist on that, and then also bring in a case study from an athlete, I believe in Norway, and share that case study and compare the training approach and the way they measured things with this PMC here. Yeah, I try to give some more information on what's out there, and then maybe open some people's eyes to other approaches to things. I think that this PMC is very useful. It's very popular in the United States. Other parts of the country or world, excuse me, use it as well. There's also plenty of professional athletes and gold medal winners, world tour riders that they're not using the performance management chart, and they might not even be using progressive overload or periodization, as we're led to believe is superior. There's actually, there's a lot of different studies out there. To my knowledge, there's not a single study that supports that periodization is the best training model. It works. There's definitely some science there, and it's based on progressive overload. So you're going to overload systems gradually, which gives you a chance to adapt. Also minimize the risks of getting sick or injured. However, there's other ways to do things, and I want to bring in everything that we can use that's out there when I'm working with an athlete to try to find, the best formula for that athlete to help them get where they want to go. So again, and I talk about it a lot, but if FTP or functional threshold power, it's what pretty much all I hear all the time when people are talking about things. And this PMC is based off of that largely. So if your FTP is set incorrectly, all this data is going to be wrong here. So it's really, the system's anchored off of FTP, which maybe is not as important as we're led to believe. That could be another debate. I'm probably not going to get into that. I'll always probably allude to it, but I've got my thoughts there. But I do think there's a lot of focus on FTP. The system's based off of FTP, and I think that it has some merit for sure, but there's also some limitations. So we'll just get into what this is. So basically the blue line is an athlete's fitness is increasing over time. So this is a season. I made a fake annual training plan for 2021 to try to highlight a periodized approach using the PMC with progressive overload. So this out here is October. The race is in July. This is the big race. So this is the proposed training that comes up using periodization and progressive overload. And this is the PMC, the performance manager chart here, so that I can visualize that. And so what these gray bars are is accumulated training stress score points for each week. So TSS each week. So week one, there's some training stress. We get increase the training load and we increase it. And then week 4 is a rest week and repeat. So each week's getting a little bit longer. So there's more training stress, then we recover so we can adapt. We do it again and we repeat that. And we get out here into the build. And now we start introducing some high intensity work for these blocks here. So the duration stays pretty steady. The training load's steady from week to week. Then we recover and we get some high training load here, taper into your race right here. So I think this is a good starting point for athletes that haven't trained before. So maybe with a new athlete, I would consider this approach because it's safe and it's probably not going to overload somebody. But I also think if we just follow this to the T, we're probably missing some gains here based on this athlete's physiology. I think this works. If you think about these things that are put out here, this is designed for the masses. So we all fit under a bell curve. So this system is probably going to work for all of us a little bit. For 50% of the athletes out there fit right in the middle of the bell curve, right? If you're that athlete, this is probably going to work really great for you. If you're more on one side or the other, then maybe there's a better approach. Maybe this is too hard for you. Maybe it's too easy, depending on your goals. So anyway, it's not the only way to go. And then do we need to be a little bit more, week one's some training, week 2's harder, week 3 is hardest, recover. What if we flip this? For some athletes, this first week, because, say, okay, they do a rest week here, this first week here, make this the big week. This week's a medium, this is a lower intensity, training density week, and then you recover. Some athletes actually respond better to that. So just right there, a simple flip-flop of this might be useful. And believe me, the creators of these models are using those techniques and strategies with athletes they work with. And the books that are put out there and the blogs they're useful. you have to think about these things are geared towards the bell curve, right? The whole population. So they're going to target 50% of us as athletes. So again, 50% of the athletes out there are going to benefit from the training strategies and books and what's out there. But what's always caught my interest is 50%. So half of us, there's probably a better way to go. That's significant to me. So I know as an athlete, I've worked with coaches that have followed this, and it's helped me improve. So I definitely improved through the years of training and learning my body, and working with other athletes. I found that there's a better way to do things. So I don't actually follow this. I look at it as a tool, but I don't use it in my own training all that much as far as week to week, as far as overload. I do want to keep track of progressive overload so I don't go from 0 to 100 and hurt myself or get sick. And I want my training to get progressively a little bit harder each time. I do implement those strategies, but what I'm saying is I don't follow this nice, clean approach here that's laid out in the annual training plan. So anyway, this is something we could lay out in off season. So in the fall, we say, okay, as athletes targeting this A race out here, and we put in this annual training plan, and the model gives us this, and say, okay, if we follow all these things, we're probably going to be pretty good here, which is true. But as we all know, things happen in here, right? You crash, you get sick, family vacation, a family member passes away. There's just a lot of things that come up, and then this looks really good in the off season, and it starts to get kind of messy. And that's another reason I wanted to go over this is I know athletes get really focused on these numbers, where their CTL is or how fit they are and how tired they are based on TSB. But again, it's the tip of the iceberg here. There's a lot more to think about. This is all measuring the stress on your body. So it doesn't say much about the strain. We could create this many training stress score points this week a lot of different ways. Is it a lot of volume? Is it a lot of intensity? Is it a mixture? Because that's going to affect the strain on your system and how you adapt. So we got to look a little bit deeper in here. So same with the TSB, which is how fatigued you are. Yeah, if you're at -30, you're probably pretty tired. But you could also be tired at +10. It just depends on how you get there and what you're doing to create that number. So I think I had a teammate used to talk a lot about this. He's like, oh, my TSB is -10, or it's +10, but I'm not feeling good. And my questions always were, well, how did you get to that negative or +10? That's just a number, but we have to dive deeper. And what was the strain on your system to get you there? Was it, easy training for your physiology? Was it a limiter of yours? So that's going to take more of a toll in your training. So definitely some things to look at. What I wanted to bring up here is this study. This is a pretty good one here. This is a case study. So I'll share it here, and you can find it free online. A scientific approach to improve physiological capacity of an elite athlete. This Bent Ronestad, probably not pronouncing that correctly, has a lot of very fascinating research to me anyway that's out there. He talks about the 30-15s and compares different training strategies. Again, I think you have to look at these studies and dive deeper into it. Just because it works for this athlete or the information that comes out from these studies doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you as an athlete. I know there's a hot topic recently about the 30-15s for VO2 improvement. This scientist here, I believe he did the study on it, and he showed that doing 30-15s versus 4-minute, or I think maybe it's 5-minute intervals in the study, the athletes that did the 30-15s, VO2 max improved more over 3 weeks compared to the what they called long intervals, which were 5 minutes. But you also have to look at the athletes and what their training was before this 3-week intervention and their state. So there's a lot of things you need to look at. So we see that there's these studies, and here's a conclusion that this works. But then we also have to think about, is this going to work for me? And then you dive deeper into these studies as well. And if there's 10 test subjects, maybe 8 of them improved and 2 of them got worse. But as an average, they're going to pump out the results that, hey, this works better. But for 2 people, it didn't. So what if you're one of those 2 people, right? So you just need to look a little bit deeper into things, and then also try things, because we don't know until we try, but then be willing to adjust. So what really jumped out at me in this paper, you can read it, is they used a system here on the bottom, these charts, to This is duration, so how many training hours per week the athlete did. And you can see there's really no rhyme or reason to it. The black is high intensity training, how many hours of that they did that week. The gray is medium intensity training, so tempo, sweet spot. And then the light gray is low intensity training, so your base miles, easy riding. So you can see the training density. This is how many hours a week. So it goes 25 hours this week, and then less than 10 this week. But if we look at it, it's not nice and pretty. And then we can see the training density. There's a lot of variety to that. This is following an athlete for a year. What really might jump out at you is the VO2 max starts out at 73.8. So this is a very talented athlete. But look out here, it goes up to 87. So this athlete improves quite a bit as far as all these parameters, as far as weight room and watts per kilogram, low lactate levels, sprint power, VO2 max. This athlete's improving significantly to this training model through this time. And then here they quantified the training load. So endurance training load using arbitrary units. So basically they used the duration of the ride along with a perceived effort, which has been shown to be very successful way of quantifying training load and strain. Again, we can see here, these are low strain and then medium and then high strain. So it's kind of all over the place. To me, when I look at this, I don't see a distinct pattern. Yeah, there's a little bit of one, but not one that's jumping out at me, and definitely not one that looks nice and clean like this. This model here, this is all base period. This is all low intensity training. That it's being more and more accepted to do, some high intensity training in here is appropriate. I think most athletes are doing that. But if we follow this model to a T, and maybe some of Joel Friel's training Bible, if you just follow the tip of the iceberg, you might not do any intensity there. If you dive deeper, and I think in his new edition of the book too, he talks about doing some intensity. So again, that book's pumped out for the masses, but it's not necessarily all there is out there. There's a lot more to this. So anyway, you can see that this is nice and clean and pretty, and the athlete's probably gonna be pretty good here. This is a little bit all over the place, and the athlete is extremely good here. I believe that's all secondhand, but I believe this is an athlete that was targeting the Masters World Championships. So this is also a Masters athlete, meaning I believe he's over 35. I don't know if they gave the age. I think and not a young person. Of note is the athlete, I don't believe, got sick or injured during this time frame with these major overloads. So anyway, I think there's a lot of ways to go about training. This athlete here used block training, so these weeks are pretty extreme. Same here with this volume. I mean, it's 30-hour weeks. I suspect maybe with work, I believe this athlete was working as well, so maybe they got some vacation time, so they utilize that. And then a lot of times there's maybe some, a little time crunch, like many of us. I suspect that some of the randomness to this. But then you can also see this week is a ton of high intensity work, but then there's not much for a few weeks. And then there's a major overload for 2 weeks. And so systems are being overloaded differently. But to me, this is not a traditional periodized progressive approach. They're looking at test results. They are testing this athlete periodically, which I think is important. They're seeing improvements and they're making decisions on the training based on these improvements. We know that this athlete's quantifying their load, and I have to believe there's a lot of communication between this athlete and their coach during these time frames and how they're feeling and from day to day. So they're using tools, but they're also factoring in the strain on the system. And I don't think that this system factors in strain very well. Another thing that you might want to look at is you can change these constants here. So for different athletes, the one that you might look at is ATL and changing this constant. Seven's what most people probably, with the fatigue. And so it's based on 7 days. So most athletes are probably going to be feeling similar to what the chart says if they have this at 7. But you might mess with that a little bit. And it might, you might be, boy, this chart doesn't really coincide with how I feel that well. Maybe if you put this to 10, or even if you're an older athlete that doesn't recover as quickly, saying a 10-day fatigue constant, or maybe you want to put it down to even 5 days if you recover more quickly, or for a younger athlete. So there's articles that you can look at there, but I suspect that many athletes aren't even thinking about manipulating this constant to